I remember the first time I stepped into the old mine. The forest around it was silent, heavy with fog, and the pale light of a broken moon barely cut through the trees. Every step on the cracked path sent echoes that seemed to stretch forever, and I could hear the faint hum of something unplaceable. The air smelled of damp earth and rust, and somewhere deep inside I felt eyes tracing me through the mist. I wanted to turn back, but the curiosity was stronger than fear. The mine's entrance yawned like a mouth in the shadows, and for a moment I could swear I heard someone whisper my name. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but then I saw the flicker of light deeper inside, like a lantern moving against the darkness. And it wasn't mine. That's when I realized I might not be alone. The ladder groaned beneath me. Each rung felt older than the last. The wood smelled of damp and rot. Fog clung to the walls like it had been waiting for me. It was thick, almost alive. I could see it curling around my arms, brushing my skin. The air smelled metallic. Old iron, rust, blood maybe. Not fresh, just lingering. Every breath I drew tasted sharp, cold. The stone walls seemed to hum. A low, vibrating static, constant but unplaceable. Almost like whispers, faint but there. I stopped for a moment. Felt the fog pressing in from all sides. It moved like water, slow and deliberate. A shadow flickered across the wall. I squinted, trying to find a source. There was none. The ladder shivered under my weight. I pressed my hands to the wood. My fingers left damp marks that the fog swallowed immediately. Deeper down, I heard it. A tapping. Soft, rhythmic. Metal on stone, maybe, or nails. Or something else entirely. It was faint at first. Then it seemed to match my heartbeat. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. The static whispered louder. Not words exactly, but something like intention. A soft pressure in my skull urging me onward. I took another step. Then another. Each rung louder than the last. The walls began to narrow. Fog thickened. My breath puffed out in small clouds. The tapping grew closer. I froze. It wasn't coming from above or below. It was all around me. A faint light appeared. Pale, unreal. It didn't shine, it seeped. From cracks in the stone, from the fog itself, shadows stretched along the walls. They weren't mine. They moved independently, curling and twisting. The hum rose, almost melodic. A vibration in my chest. My teeth buzzed. My ears rang. I felt something brush my shoulder, cold and wet. I spun, ladder rattling beneath me. There was nothing. Just fog, just shadows. I climbed slower, deliberately, trying to ignore the static whispers pressing at the edge of thought. They seemed to know me. The tapping returned. Closer now, like fingernails drumming on bone. I stopped, listened, felt the stone walls pulse beneath my palms. The fog parted just slightly, and I saw it, a shape, dark against the pale light. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. But I could feel it, watching. I couldn't move. I wanted to. My legs wouldn't obey. The shadow shifted. A glimmer of something reflective. Eyes, maybe. Or just the fog playing tricks. I swallowed. Hard. The sound seemed deafening in the tight shaft. It tapped once more. Then silence. A quiet that made the hum feel louder. I forced myself to climb. Step by step. Hard in my throat. The ladder ended abruptly. A wooden platform. I had no memory of it from the surface. The fog was thinner here. I could see more of the walls. Stone, slick with moisture. The static pulsed around me. Fingers of sound curling toward me. I realized it wasn't coming from the walls. It was inside me, a soft scuffing from behind. Not footsteps exactly, but deliberate. I spun again. Nothing. Just fog. The shape lingered in the corner of vision, always at the edge. Never full, never clear. I climbed down the last few rungs. My palms ached. My head ached. The tapping ceased. The hum did not. It was waiting, patient. I took a cautious step forward. The fog closed behind me, thick and cold. It smelled metallic again. A shadow passed directly in front of me. I blinked. Gone. I swallowed again, and then froze. Something was staring. Not with eyes, not really, but with attention. A weight pressing against my chest. I wanted to call out, but no sound emerged. Just the soft, insistent hum. The ladder was behind me. Escape possible, but somehow pointless. I felt rooted to the spot. Fog swirled around my ankles. The static whispered my name. Or maybe it only sounded like my name. The tapping started again. From somewhere just out of reach. Closer, but not close enough. I blinked. The shape had moved closer. Or maybe I had. Or maybe it had always been there. A soft exhale left my lips. Cold and shaky. It was returned by the fog. Like it had remembered me, I stood. Heart hammering in slow, uneven beats. Unable to tell if I was alone, and then I realized I wasn't moving at all. The shaft had ended. The ladder gone, and the thing, it was still watching. The fog had settled low. It clung to the ground, curling around the roots of trees. The forest smelled damp, like old earth and smoke. I stepped carefully, the soil soft beneath my boots. Each footfall seemed louder than it should be. Mist curled around my ankles, hiding what lay beneath. Lanterns appeared. Far off, at first just small glimmers, trembling like fireflies. Then they moved, slowly, gliding over the earth. No sound followed them. No crackle, no hum, nothing but the subtle shush of leaves. I felt drawn, compelled to follow. With each step, the fog thickened. It pressed against my skin, wet and cold. Branches reached out, scratching bare arms as if testing me. The lantern's light flickered, pale and uneven. Shadows danced where there should have been none. And then I saw the first face. A woman, her eyes too wide, reflecting the lantern's glow. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. When I blinked, she was gone. I told myself it was the fog playing tricks. But the lanterns moved closer, weaving between the trees. Faces appeared and vanished, always at the edge of vision. The earth beneath my feet felt softer, almost sponge-like. I stepped into a hollow. A faint hum rose from the soil, low and insistent. The fog seemed alive. It whispered over my skin, curling around my neck like breath. I couldn't tell if it was wind or something watching. I stopped. The lanterns lingered just beyond the clearing. Their light pooled on the moss, revealing shapes that didn't belong. I saw hands. Thin, pale, too long. They hovered near the trees, vanishing into the fog when I turned my head. Something moved behind the lanterns, always just out of reach. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. My own voice felt swallowed by the thick, suffocating air. The forest had shifted. Branches bent at impossible angles. Roots twisted like coiled snakes under the fog. I took another step. The lanterns flickered violently and the faces appeared again. This time closer. Too close, one looked directly at me. Eyes hollow, skin stretched too thin, lips moving in a silent rhythm. I couldn't understand, but I felt the words pressing into my mind, then they were gone. The lanterns drifted back, leaving only fog and silence. I waited, every nerve alert, every shadow a potential movement, a soft rustle behind me. I spun. Nothing, only the fog, curling around the trunks like smoke. A pale light flickered between the branches. And I thought I saw a figure, a girl, small, hunched, before it melted into gray. I followed, drawn like a moth. The forest seemed to stretch, elongate. Each step forward brought me deeper into emptiness. The lanterns reappeared. Closer now, almost at my shoulder, drifting without a single sound. They illuminated eyes everywhere. Watching, waiting. Faces, half-formed, lingered in the periphery. Mouths opening, closing, whispering things I could not hear. I wanted to run, but the fog held me in place. A sudden hush. Even the lanterns froze, suspended in air. I felt a breath at my ear, soft, deliberate, and impossibly close. I turned sharply. No one. Just fog, curling and retreating, leaving a hollow space in the air. The lanterns blinked out. All light vanished, leaving only the wet black of the forest. I stood alone. The earth beneath me seemed to sigh. Roots shifted imperceptibly and the fog drew tight around my legs. Every sound, every movement seemed amplified in the quiet. I kept walking, the memory of faces burning behind my eyes. Branches snapped softly, though no one was there. A shadow brushed past my shoulder, but when I turned, only fog remained. And then, just before the clearing ended, I heard it again. A whisper, light as smoke, tickling the back of my neck. A single word, barely formed, carried through the mist. I froze. The forest seemed to breathe with me. The fog swirled and thinned, and for a heartbeat, the night felt still. The lanterns had vanished. Faces were gone. Only silence lingered, but heavy like something waiting. I stepped forward. The fog pulled apart like curtains, and I realized the path I had followed no longer existed. It was only earth, wet, soft, and waiting, and I was alone. The air smelled of damp stone. A chill pressed against my skin, though the day outside was warm. I had stepped into the old mining tunnels, the path I had walked 100 times, yet today it felt different. Footsteps echoed ahead, or maybe behind. They bounced off walls that should have been silent. I paused. Nothing moved. The echo lingered. Voices whispered my name, or something close enough to it. I strained, but the syllables weren't mine. They were softer, urgent, coaxing. The beams from my lantern stretched thin across jagged walls. Every shadow trembled in the corners of my vision. I told myself it was the wind, curling through cracks long sealed. But the murmurs didn't shift with the drafts. A pickaxe rang somewhere far away, or perhaps just a memory of one. The rhythm matched no human pace, irregular, deliberate, ancient. It came from a shaft that had been closed for decades. I moved forward. The stone floor underfoot hummed faintly. I could feel the vibration through my boots. Each step seemed to awaken something that had been sleeping. A brush of cold against my arm made me flinch. Air, I thought. Nothing but air. Yet it lingered, heavier than wind, carrying the faint scent of iron. I shivered, but kept walking. The corridor narrowed. Shadows pooled at the corners like water. I could hear soft footsteps, mine or someone else's. Each tap against stone echoed too sharply, too perfectly. A pale light flickered ahead. It was not my lantern. It shifted, moved, as though the walls themselves were breathing. I froze, every nerve tight. The voices returned. Not calling me this time. Calling someone else. Names I didn't know. Names that stuttered, dissolved, returned. I turned a corner. The space opened into a chamber I thought long abandoned. Rusted mining carts leaned to one side, tools scattered. Yet the hum was there again, low and vibrating, filling every inch of the stone. I stopped. The shadow was waiting. At first I thought it was a trick of the flickering light. Then it shifted. Just slightly. Watching. Patient. I whispered to myself that I was imagining it. I repeated it like a charm, a warning to my own mind. But the air grew thicker, heavier, almost solid. It moved around me, curling, curling. Something brushed my shoulder. I flinched, spinning around. Nothing. Only the soft sigh of the tunnel breathing. The voices lingered at the edges of hearing. Soft steps paced somewhere ahead. I could not see their source. Could not see where they ended. A cold draft rose from the shaft, carrying a taste of wet stone and rust. I swallowed hard. The echoing pickaxe resumed, closer now, precise. I felt it in my chest, each vibration shaking me from the inside. The lantern trembled in my hand. Shadows stretched and recoiled. The chamber seemed alive, breathing around me, pressing in. Something unseen leaned close and the hairs on my neck rose. I tried to move. My feet felt locked to the stone. The names whispered again, softer now, almost gentle. Not mine, not anyone I knew, but intimate, urgent, insistent. A stillness followed. So complete I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in the silence. The light flickered once more, then held. The shadow remained, paused at the edge of vision. It did not advance. It did not retreat. It simply waited. I took a careful breath. The air carried no words, no steps, just weight. I told myself to leave, to move, but the floor seemed farther than before. The stone walls pressed closer. The echoing of forgotten tools faded, leaving only soft, shallow hums. I could feel them vibrating beneath my skin. A presence, patient and unseen, breathing along with me. I edged toward the chamber's exit. The voices dimmed, distant, almost sorrowful. The shadow lingered in the corner of my eye, dissolving when I focused. A faint chill lingered along my spine, the memory of its gaze following me. I stepped into the narrow tunnel again. The hum softened, the light dimmed, the names vanished. Yet I knew the echoes of this place would follow me long after the stone walls had faded behind me. The window of the surface seemed so small, so pale now. I could hear the wind outside, soft, forgiving. But something remained, a breath, a pause, and the quiet certainty that I had not left alone. The air smelled of damp earth, cold metallic damp clinging to my clothes. The sun was low, pale light slipping between broken timbers of the old mine entrance. I had walked these tracks before, years ago, when I thought the forest ended at the hills. Now the tracks led nowhere, or maybe I just didn't want to see where they went. A cart sat there, rusted, silent, still, except for the way the light caught on its edges, glinting like it was breathing. I stepped closer. Metal whispered against stone. Not a sound I could place, just a scrape. Slow, patient, moving. I froze. The tracks ahead were empty. I could feel it in my chest, something shifting behind me, but when I turned, nothing moved. The cart hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, and I just didn't notice. Its wheels were thin with rust, edges curled like paper left out in rain. I took a step. Another scrape. Closer. My shadow stretched across the ground, wavering in the fading light. I thought I saw a hand reach out from inside the cart. But when I blinked, it was gone. Silence stretched then. Thick, almost solid, pressing against my ears. I waited, breathing soft, shallow breaths. The metal moved again. Soft, dragging across stone. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted in dust and decay. I looked down. The cart was gone. Not around the bend, not behind a rock. Vanished. In the dust, a small handprint. Pale, delicate. Pressed into the gray earth like a whisper. I knelt. Finger traced the outline, cold, almost warm, as if it had just been there. The wind moved through the mine. Soft footsteps, I thought. But the air was still. I could hear nothing, yet felt something circling, watching, breathing with me. I stood. The tracks stretched endlessly, leading to nothing, twisting into shadows I didn't understand. Every step I took echoed louder than it should. The forest pressed closer, fog creeping along the roots, along the broken rails. The air tasted of iron and moss. The smell stayed in my mouth long after I turned away. I glanced back once. Nothing. Just the dust, and the faint impression of a hand that couldn't have belonged to anyone alive. My footsteps carried me out of the mine, slow, careful. The scrape never came again. Yet sometimes when the wind rustles the leaves just right, I hear it. Metal on stone, soft, patient, and always waiting. The air was thick, heavy with dust that clung to my skin. The shaft smelled of wet stone and something older. I moved slowly, my footsteps soft, swallowed almost entirely by the quiet. Every wall seemed alive, not moving exactly, but whispering. I pressed my ear to the cold stone. Voices stirred, faint, far away but familiar, like memories half remembered. They spoke in low murmurs, threading through the darkness. A miner's laughter, brittle and hollow, echoed once. Then a groan. A name, my name, slipped between cracks in the stone. Shadows danced against my lantern. They flickered and twitched, not quite matching the shape of anything real. I thought I saw hands reach from the walls, then vanish when I blinked. The whispers became clearer. Stories of miners lost to the depths, swallowed by stone and silence. They spoke of hunger, cold, and mistakes that led to darkness. I tried to step back, but my boots seemed rooted. The walls pressed closer in my mind. A soft hum vibrated through the stones, and I could feel it in my chest. One voice lingered longer than the rest, older, patient. It curled around my thoughts, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. I shivered, and the lantern flickered, casting everything into pale, trembling light. I leaned closer, compelled. A word floated up, almost gentle. "Stay." I jerked back. The walls fell silent, but the shadows remained. A rustling moved beneath the floorboards. Or was it inside the stone itself? I couldn't tell, couldn't even breathe without thinking it would echo and betray me. My lantern caught something, a shimmer in the corner of my vision. I turned. Nothing. But the air had thickened. Pulling at my hair, my skin, my mind, the voices returned, fragmented now, overlapping. I heard a child laughing, a pickaxe striking rock, a groan of regret. The whispers were tangled with the twitching shadows, indistinguishable and insistent. I pressed my ear again, feeling the rough stone bite at my skin. Stories crawled through my thoughts like insects. A miner lost, trapped for centuries, speaking to no one. Until me. I backed away slowly. The walls seemed to leaning closer than physics should allow. Each breath felt heavy, as if the darkness itself weighed on my chest. The shadows moved faster now. They had shape, suggestion, maybe faces, maybe nothing. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. A soft scraping followed me. Feet, claws, or stone grinding against stone. I didn't dare look. I tried to speak, to tell myself it was imagination, but the air swallowed my words, leaving only the quiet hum of something watching. The whispers returned for a moment, urgent, pleading, then stopped abruptly. Silence, thick as mud, settled in the shaft. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing back at me from the walls. Every shadow froze mid-motion, as if waiting for something unseen. Then a low growl rose from the depths, vibrating through the floor and walls. It wasn't animal. Not quite human. It resonated with the stone, thrumming inside me. I could feel the presence behind the whispers, waiting. I wanted to run, wanted to throw myself into the open, but the walls seemed to breathe with me, alive and patient. The shadows shivered once, then stilled again. The whispers had vanished. Only the growl lingered, soft now, vibrating like a warning I didn't understand. I stayed rooted, barely daring to move. The shaft smelled of old stone and wet earth, and the quiet returned, fragile, expectant. I pressed my ear one last time. Nothing spoke. Yet I could still feel the weight of their stories pressing into me, and somewhere deep below the growl waited, patient as stone. The lantern swung slightly. The shadows did not follow. But I knew somehow they were still watching. The ladder felt colder than metal should. I pressed my fingers against the frost, shivering even before I began to climb. Each rung groaned beneath my weight, brittle in a way that seemed alive. The fog had come in waves, curling around my legs, clinging to my coat. It smelled faintly of wet stone and something older, deeper. I couldn't tell where the fog began or where the shadows ended. I lifted my foot to the next rung. A sudden draft swept down, carrying a whisper that was almost a laugh. I froze, holding my breath, footsteps above me. Then below, not random, not human, but following some rhythm I couldn't name. My eyes strained into the darkness. A flicker, something moving, just beyond the pale light from above. I thought it was my imagination. But the shadow didn't retreat. I climbed higher, slower, each rung colder than the last. The metal bit into my palms. Frost seemed to seep into my skin. I felt it crawling, twisting along my veins. The fog thickened with every inch. It muffled the sound of the world. Or maybe it was the world itself that had gone silent, leaving only me and the ladder. The shadow shifted again. Not high above, not far below, but poised somewhere in between, watching, patient. I tried to focus on the sound of my own breathing, short, shallow gasps that seemed too loud in the heavy air. But the footsteps continued, moving in tandem with me, yet not touching. I reached a rung where frost had thickened into jagged edges. They scratched my hands, drawing tiny lines of blood that vanished almost as soon as they appeared. The chill wasn't just cold. It was invasive. Inside me, whispering, a creak from above. The ladder shifted, tilting slightly. Something moved just out of sight, and I could feel its eyes on my back. I forced myself upward. One rung at a time, every movement measured. The fog pressed closer, a living thing, brushing against my face and neck. I thought I heard whispers in its folds, words I almost recognized but never fully. Familiar. Wrong. The ladder seemed endless. I counted rungs, then stopped, lost in the rhythm of frost and silence. Footsteps above me, now slow, deliberate. Footsteps below, skittering, restless. I reached a rung where frost had melted slightly from some warmth, though the air remained frigid. I pressed my palm to it. A soft vibration ran through the metal, up my arm, into my chest. Something alive, something aware. A flicker of movement again. Above in the void, something shifted. Not human, Not solid. I dared a glance upward. Eyes, many eyes, reflecting the pale light, blinking in patterns I couldn't follow. The fog seemed to curl around them, holding them just out of reach. I climbed past them, each rung a decision between fear and necessity. The footsteps echoed less now, replaced by a low hum, almost like breathing. I realized it was mine. Mine and something else. I stopped midway, gripping the ladder until my knuckles whitened. The frost was no longer just cold. It burned, and the fog whispered my name. I could see the top now, pale light spilling from somewhere above. It promised warmth, safety, maybe escape. Yet the shadow lingered, folded in the corners of vision. Following every move, I climbed again, slowly, methodically. Each rung a small eternity. The hum grew louder, vibrating in my chest, in my teeth, in my bones. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me. It came back, hollow, like it had been carried by someone else. A final flicker. Movement. Eyes. Breath. I reached the top. The fog remained. The shadow vanished, and the ladder ended. Above, a faint light. Warm, inviting, impossibly distant. I stepped forward, and the world shifted beneath me, soft and unsteady. The footsteps stopped. The hum faded into silence. I moved toward the light, and yet somewhere behind me I knew the ladder still waited. Cold, frosted, watching. Even as the fog thinned, the memory of eyes stayed, and I knew I wasn't alone. The air was still, but the quiet carried a weight I could not name. I walked into the pale light, and it seemed to follow me. The air smelled of damp earth and rust. Faint dust rose in pale streams from the floor. I stepped inside the tunnel where light barely touched the walls. Old photographs leaned against broken beams. Faces stared back, blurred and pale. Eyes that had seen too much, lingering long after the bodies had gone. A helmet lay on the ground, caked in dirt. Its leather strap curled like a finger reaching. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The silence pressed close, thick and heavy. Each breath seemed louder than it should be. Something moved just at the edge of vision. Then nothing. A photograph shifted. I hadn't touched it. Its eyes seemed to flicker, following, accusing, silent. The walls hummed softly, a resonance beneath my feet. I imagined whispers threading through the stone, weaving a story I couldn't grasp. They spoke without words. Footsteps echoed, though I stood still. Shadows pooled in the corners where beams had collapsed. A faint rustling, like old clothing brushing against rock. I reached for the photograph again. The eyes in the image felt warmer this time, closer. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest, slow and deliberate. Helmets lined the ground in irregular rows. Some were cracked, others intact but faded to gray. Each seemed to hum with memory. I could feel them watching, waiting. They remembered themselves, long after the tunnels had claimed their bodies. I whispered apologies that vanished into the stone. A light trembled in the distance. Not my flashlight, not anything I had carried. It swayed, as if breathing in the air, soft and hesitant. I followed it. Steps careful, deliberate, avoiding broken timber. Every crunch of gravel sounded like a shout in the void. I reached a narrow passage where the tunnel bent sharply. A helmet rested atop a beam, tilted. It seemed balanced, yet impossible, like it had been placed with intent. The whispers grew clearer. Fragments of laughter, of arguments, of silent cries. I felt the weight of decades pressing on my shoulders. A photograph lay on the floor, partially covered in dust. I lifted it. Two men smiled, hands on shoulders, frozen in a moment that no longer belonged to them. I turned to leave, but the tunnel seemed to stretch. The exit receded into shadows. I felt eyes on my back, soft but persistent. A faint hum rose from the floorboards of old timbers. It vibrated in my chest, in my teeth. Something small, alive, slipped past my shoulder. I paused. The photograph on the wall had shifted again. This time a hand seemed pressed against the glass, reaching. I whispered, "I'm sorry." No reply came. Only the shifting dust, the gentle breath of the dead. The air grew colder. I could see my breath curl in front of me, small ghosts of warmth. The tunnel seemed to lean inward, closer, listening. Soft footsteps fell behind me. I didn't look. Each step aligned with mine, though no one was there. I remembered stories my grandfather told, of miners who vanished, swallowed by darkness and silence. And here, it felt as if those stories were breathing in the shadows. A helmet toppled near my foot. I didn't see it fall. The metal whispered a low note as it rolled, echoing endlessly. I reached a bend where the tunnel opened into a small chamber. The walls were plastered with photographs, helmets, tools. Each relic whispered a memory, a warning, a name I could not speak. One photograph hung higher than the rest. Its eyes followed me with intent, and when I looked away, it had turned. I crouched, pressing palms to the cold stone. The air felt alive, pulsing softly with loss and regret. A whisper threaded through my thoughts. A single word I couldn't catch. I walked past helmets and photos, careful not to disturb them. The tunnel seemed infinite now, a spiral of memory and dust. Each step carried me deeper into their silence. A faint rustle brushed my arm. I froze, heart slow and deliberate. Nothing was there, but the feeling lingered, cold and accusing. I reached the edge of the chamber, light from outside, just a pale smear. I hesitated. The eyes of every photograph seemed to gather in that small glow. I turned. A shadow flickered at the corner of the room, and I knew it was only watching, patient, unhurried. The air softened as I stepped into the daylight. Dust clung to my sleeves, to my hair. I dared not look back, but in the corner of my vision, one photograph lingered. The eyes waiting for someone to remember. The air was damp, clinging to my skin, thick with the smell of wet stone and old earth. My boots echoed softly against the uneven floor, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the shadows around me. It was late. The kind of late that presses against your eyelids, making every blink feel heavy. I struck a match. The torch sputtered alive in my hand, a small, trembling halo against the darkness. Light spilled in shaky waves, carving the walls into jagged, moving shapes. I swallowed. The cave, or tunnel, I wasn't sure, stretched before me like a mouth, silent and patient. The flame wavered. Flickers danced along the walls as if something unseen was brushing against them. Shadows stretched, then recoiled. A soft scrape of stone, almost imperceptible, slid past me. I held the torch higher. A figure, or maybe just the suggestion of one, shifted just beyond the torchlight. I froze. My breath shallow, caught somewhere between chest and throat. There was no sound, only the hum of my own pulse echoing back at me. Cold air brushed my neck, a whisper of breath, icy and deliberate. I swung around, but the tunnel remained empty, silent except for the subtle sighs of wind through unseen cracks. The torch flickered violently once, twice, as though it had caught a warning. I stepped forward. The floor was slick, mud or water, I couldn't tell. Every step made the light tremble, shapes multiplying around me. Pale reflections glinted in the dark corners, like eyes that weren't mine. I stopped. A soft shuffle came from the darkness behind me, closer now but careful, patient. The flame shivered. I could feel it in my chest before I heard it. Something watching, waiting just beyond the reach of light. The torch bent with a sudden gust, smoke curling in long, sinuous trails. Shadows danced like nervous dancers on the walls. I thought I saw a face, pale, too sharp in the brief flame, vanish the instant I blinked. The tunnel seemed longer now, stretching, breathing, aware of me. I tried to steady my hands. The torch flared, then dimmed, fighting against an invisible wind. Something moved behind me. Soft footsteps, too light to belong to the earth, yet deliberate. I didn't dare look. The flame sputtered again. Shapes merged and separated in the periphery, never standing still. A low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating along the stones under my feet. I held my breath. The hum seemed alive, curious, circling me, threading through my bones. I took another step. The torch flickered violently as if protesting, then died. Darkness swallowed me. I could feel the eyes before I could see them. Faint glimmers, pale and distant, blinked intermittently, just beyond reach. They hovered, patient, knowing. My heart hammered in rhythm with the brief pulses of light. The tunnel had shifted, longer, narrower, stranger than it had been. Cold seeped deeper into my skin. Soft, deliberate footsteps brushed past me, circling, never touching. I wanted to call out, but my voice felt too heavy, thick in my throat. I imagined a shadow leaning closer, watching me, smelling the heat of my skin. The air thickened. Time seemed to stretch, each second drawn into eternity. I reached out, fingertips grazing stone, hoping for familiarity. Instead, I felt only the wet, cold, and something soft brushing against my hand. I dared a glance. Nothing. Yet the eyes blinked again, from somewhere I couldn't locate. The faint glimmers drifted like fireflies, distant and detached, patient in their observation. My chest tightened. The tunnel seemed to exhale, cold and damp. I could hear the faintest whisper, almost part of the hum now, brushing against the walls. Words I couldn't catch, only fragments, soft as moss underfoot. I held the torchless hand to my chest. The shadows seemed to lean inward, forming shapes that were never still. Something soft, deliberate, pressed closer to my skin, brushing a cold hand along my spine. I didn't move. The glimmers pulsed once, then faded to a dim, steady glow. Nothing moved now. The tunnel exhaled slowly, and silence settled over me like a thick, damp blanket. I stayed still, breathing in shallow whispers, letting the darkness fold around me. A faint glimmer lingered ahead, distant, like an eye waiting. I could feel its attention, patient, unjudging, never leaving. And I realized I wasn't meant to see it fully, only to know it was there. I stepped forward carefully. The damp stone pressed cold against my palms, guiding me. Every step was slow, deliberate, a whisper of movement through the hollow silence. And the glimmer waited, always ahead. A quiet promise of unseen eyes. I didn't know how far I'd go, nor did I know what would follow if I stopped. The torchlight may have died, but the eyes had not. They waited in the dark, patient, curious, gentle, yet watchful. I walked on. The air was thick tonight, humid and close, like it had been waiting. I had followed the hallway past the familiar rooms, past the broken light that flickered pale and uneven. At the end, a door I hadn't noticed before stood ajar, black as wet stone. The first step into the chamber made the air shift. It smelled of damp, of earth that had long been buried. The walls? They were carved from black stone, smooth yet jagged in the way shadows seemed to cling to them. My voice sounded wrong here, echoed back at me, stretched and thin as though it belonged to someone else. I said a name, my own, and it returned, slurred, like it was trying to twist it into something unfamiliar. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision. Not like a trick of the light, not exactly, but curling, stretching, coiling just beyond reach. I wanted to turn, but the pull kept me rooted to the center of the room. There was a hum, soft at first, almost hesitant, rising from beneath my feet. It traveled through my soles into my chest, vibrating like it had known me before I arrived. The floor was alive. I could feel it breathe, swell under the weight of my curiosity. Each step made it pulse, like it was deciding if I belonged or not. I crouched to press a hand against it. Cold, yes, but also yielding, pliant, strange. It seemed to respond to my touch. A subtle wave that shimmered along the surface, almost like liquid stone. Shadows thickened in the corners. They weren't static. They stretched toward me slowly, but without urgency. A presence, neither threatening nor welcoming, watched from just beyond perception. I tried to listen past the hum. There was a whisper, or maybe a resonance in the stone itself. Words I didn't recognize, but they made my skin crawl in familiar ways, like memories I couldn't place. The air shifted again. Cold, brief, like the chamber exhaled in a long, deliberate sigh. I could see my reflection in the stone, pale and slightly off, features blurred, shadowed at the edges. I stepped closer to the center. The hum rose, deeper now, filling my chest, my throat, making my heartbeat sync with it. The floor's breathing became my own, or perhaps mine became the floor's. Corners darkened further. I imagined something moving there, leaning just out of sight, but when I blinked, it was gone. Yet the feeling lingered, like I had been observed long before I arrived. I pressed a palm to the wall. The stone was warm under my hand, pulsing like it had a heartbeat hidden within. A shadow flickered across the surface, like a hand brushing past from the other side. The hum softened, almost coaxing, almost comforting. I sank to the floor, letting the vibrations course through me. It wasn't frightening, not exactly, but it was profound, unsettling in ways I could not name. I tried to speak, but words caught in my throat. Even silence here was full, heavy with presence. A question lingered, unspoken, hovering at the edge of my understanding. Time seemed to blur. Minutes, hours, how could I tell? Folded into each other, measured only by the pulsing of stone beneath me. The walls seemed to listen, to breathe along with the floor, to respond to every shallow intake of breath. Eventually, I rose. Each movement echoed, stretched thin, then returned in strange, writhing shapes. The shadows had receded slightly, but I knew they lingered, waiting at thresholds my eyes could not reach. I edged toward the doorway, reluctant. The hum followed. A gentle vibration. A soft insistence that perhaps I was not yet ready to leave. I paused, feeling the weight of unseen attention pressing softly, insistently against my spine. Outside, the hallway was quiet again. The normal dimness of lamps felt almost loud after the hollow room. And yet, even as I walked away, I could feel the floor beneath me, breathing still, patient and watchful. Sometimes when the house is silent, I swear I can hear it again. A low hum, almost a sigh, rising from somewhere below. And I wonder if it remembers me as I remember it. The air was damp, clinging to my skin like a cold, wet cloth. A faint mist curled around my ankles, drifting upwards with each cautious step. I had stumbled upon the passage by accident, or maybe it had been waiting for me. The tunnel was narrower than I expected. Walls pressed close, slick with moisture. Every turn I took seemed familiar yet strange, as if the walls themselves remembered my steps. Faint shapes flickered in the mist. Symbols etched into stone glowed pale and weak. I leaned closer, drawn in by the soft pulse of light that seemed alive, breathing slowly along the surface. I stepped carefully, counting each echo, but the sound didn't behave normally. It returned before I expected it, almost mimicking my movement. The air thickened. Breath condensed into little clouds, dissipating too quickly. I could feel something, someone, trailing me, always a fraction behind. Soft footsteps, but none of mine matched them. They paused when I paused, shifted when I shifted. Yet I never saw anyone. I traced the symbols with my fingertips. They were warm, almost pulsing beneath my skin. Each one seemed to hum, a low vibration that whispered along my spine. The passage curved sharply, twisting back onto itself. I thought I recognized the turn. And then I realized I had been here before. A chill crawled over my neck. The mist wrapped tighter around my shoulders like invisible hands. Every step forward seemed to fold the passage back into itself, trapping me in a spiral I couldn't escape. I whispered, trying to convince myself. This is just a trick of the mind. Just a tunnel. But the echo of my own voice didn't answer. It shifted, distant and distorted. Light flickered ahead, faint and trembling. I hurried, compelled to reach it, though the passage had no end. The symbols glimmered brighter as I approached, their patterns twisting into something I couldn't name. A soft rustle came from behind. Closer now, patient, deliberate. I froze, listening to the mist swirl around the sound, feeling its pace match mine. The walls seemed to lean in. Shadow merged with mist, folding corners into impossible angles. I realized the glow of the symbols wasn't guiding me, it was watching. I turned slowly, peering into the haze. Nothing moved, yet everything shifted. Shapes that weren't shapes pressed at the edge of my vision, retreating when I focused. I whispered my own name. It echoed back, warped, followed by a faint, deliberate mimic of my heartbeat. A presence, silent but aware, mirrored every motion I made. I tried to step sideways. The passage twisted differently, but always returned me to the same point. My mind wanted to run. My body wanted to obey. The symbols glowed stronger, casting pale light over the mist. I reached out again. They pulsed faster under my fingers, sending a wave of warmth and dread through me. A soft, deliberate breathing floated just behind me. Not mine, not human, I thought, but it carried the rhythm of something alive, patient. I stumbled forward. The passage curved impossibly. Walls bled shadow into the mist, filling every gap with shifting darkness. A chill rose from my chest. I realized I had been circling the same stretch for hours, or minutes. Time was impossible here, suspended in the thick, humming fog. I stopped. The soft footsteps paused too. A silence pressed in, thick and expectant, humming in tandem with the glowing symbols. I leaned against the wall. Mist brushed my cheeks. The glow from the symbols pulsed slower, deeper, as if inhaling with the unseen presence. I whispered a single word. No answer came, only the soft vibration of the tunnel itself. It felt alive, aware, waiting for my next move. A cold tendril of mist curled around my wrist. I pulled back, but it lingered, teasing, guiding, pressing me onward. I wanted to follow, and yet I feared where it would lead. The passage curved again, and again I was back at the same narrow bend. The glow of the symbols had dimmed, leaving only the soft, expectant hum of the air. I realized I had become part of the tunnel's rhythm. Every breath, every heartbeat, every tentative step mirrored by the unseen watcher. The mist, the symbols, the soft, unending footsteps. They were endless. I sat on the cold stone floor. The fog swirled around me, thick and curling. The tunnel hummed a gentle, waiting song, folding over itself, endless, patient, and I understood, without moving, without looking, that some passages are not meant to end. They are meant to fold the mind into the mist. I would wander here forever, beneath the veiled glow, footsteps trailing, soft and deliberate. The air changed the moment I stepped over the rubble. Dust clung to my skin, dry and thin. Above me the world was dim, sunless, but below, it felt endless. I lowered myself into the cavern. Cold seeped through my sleeves, carrying a damp, earthy scent. Shadows clung to the jagged walls, sliding slowly, as if they breathed with me. The first tap came almost immediately, soft, musical, like someone lightly drumming fingertips on hollow bone. It pulsed against my chest, and I realized it matched my heartbeat. I froze. The air hummed between each tap, filling the space in a way that made silence almost impossible. I thought I felt the walls shift, though I knew they couldn't. A faint light trickled from somewhere above, pale and watery. It caught a glint on the stone, a reflection that looked like eyes. I blinked. They weren't there. Another tap. Closer now. My leg twitched. I felt a brush, fleeting, too soft to name. I looked down. Nothing. The shadows pressed closer to the edges of my vision but vanished when I tried to focus. The tapping slowed, then stopped. Only the hum of my own breath remained. I could feel the dark pressing against the back of my skull, patient and heavy. I took a step. The floor shivered beneath my boot, or maybe it was me. Something slid across the wall, quick, jagged. I wanted to turn, but my feet remained glued to the rough stone. A whisper of air brushed past my ear. Not wind, not my imagination. A quiet rhythm, almost melodic, like someone counting in the dark. I crouched to examine the rubble. Pieces of broken rock and pale dust, untouched by human hands. Between the cracks, I swore I saw movement, a ripple in the shadow, like a finger dragging itself along the wall. The taps began again, distant at first, then rushing in a wave. It was inside me now, vibrating along my ribs. I pressed my hand to my chest, but it didn't stop. A figure seemed to hover just beyond the weak light. Thin, elongated, impossible angles in the limbs. But when I blinked, only shadow remained. I wanted to call out, but the sound felt too sharp. My throat tightened. The cavern swallowed my breath, folding it into the darkness. Soft footsteps whispered behind me. Not mine, not human. I spun, half expecting a face to emerge, but there was only the wall. The rhythm shifted, faster now, erratic, playful, almost laughing. It moved around me, brushing close enough to make my skin prickle. I couldn't look, couldn't follow it. Something cold grazed my shoulder. I jumped, heart thrumming. Nothing again. Just air, just shadow. The ceiling dripped somewhere far above. Each drop struck the stone like a muted bell. I counted them, trying to distract myself, but the pattern never repeated. I crouched deeper into a nook, hoping the shadows would pass. Instead, they pooled, thick and viscous, forming shapes just beyond recognition. I felt the weight of them pressing against my spine, a slow, deliberate pressure. Then, silence. No tapping. No breathing, no hum. Even my own heartbeat seemed to pause. I exhaled, slow and shallow. The darkness began to shimmer, subtle and strange. A pale outline traced the wall, slender, shifting, barely there. I touched it with my fingertips. Cold, wet like melted stone. It recoiled under my skin, leaving a faint burn. The faint musical tapping returned, now echoing as if from a distance I couldn't place. It coaxed me forward toward a tunnel that hadn't been there before. I wanted to step back, wanted to run, but curiosity kept my legs moving. Soft fog rose from the floor, curling around my ankles. It smelled of rain and something older, something that had been here long before me. Every breath I drew carried a taste of wet stone and shadow. The walls seemed to breathe now, slow in, slow out, as if the cavern itself was alive. And in the faint light, I could see the shadows stretching, almost reaching. I stopped. The tapping ceased. The shadows froze. A single brush of air like a sigh passed through me. I could feel something there, just out of reach, patient, watching. I turned slowly to leave. But the tunnel behind me had changed. The rubble was smoother, more deliberate, and the faint echo of tapping lingered, hiding in the corners in the fog, beneath my own heartbeat. I didn't run. I only walked, and somewhere deep below, I knew the shadows were moving, still alive, still waiting. The ladder groaned under my weight. Cold stone walls closed in as I descended. A faint smell of damp earth hung in the air, thick and heavy. I reached the bottom. The mine opened into a cavern I hadn't expected. The ceiling arched high, pale light glinting off something still. Deep, a lake, black and perfect, like glass untouched for centuries. It held the faint shimmer of the torch, though it reflected nothing of the world above. I stepped closer, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. My breath slowed. I could almost hear it, a soft lap at the water's edge. I froze. No one else was there. I knelt. The surface didn't ripple like a normal lake. Instead, the light bent strangely, twisting across a reflection that wasn't quite mine. My face stared back, pale and familiar. But the eyes, they weren't mine. They lingered on me, unblinking. A tilt of the head, slow, deliberate. I pulled back, my hands shaking. The silence pressed closer, filling the cavern with a weight that made the walls sigh. And then a faint splash, a droplet, tiny from somewhere beneath the black mirror. Then another. A pattern, deliberate, slow. I leaned over, trying to see. Ripples bloomed across the lake. Something moved beneath the surface. It paused just below the pale shimmer, as if it knew I was watching. I held my breath, my reflection twisted. The eyes now followed my hands, mocking each small twitch. I took a step back. The cavern felt smaller suddenly, the shadows heavier, and the lake seemed to stretch endless, deeper than physics allowed. I crouched, my fingers brushing the water. It was ice cold, far colder than it should have been underground. A shiver crawled up my spine, slow and sticky. A ripple ran outward from nowhere. Something brushed my wrist, light, almost tender. But when I looked, the surface was still. I tried to speak. My voice echoed, swallowed by stone. The cavern answered only with the drip of distant water and the soft sighing of the walls. A shape emerged beneath the surface, pale, almost liquid, gliding with a grace that wasn't human. It paused, right beneath my reflection. The eyes met mine again. Shallow, endless, impossible. I felt a pulse in the air, in the hum of stone and water. The water bubbled softly. Ripples stretched toward me, though no wind moved. My own reflection smiled, slow and impossible. I stumbled back. The light flickered, caught in veins of mineral along the walls. Shadows quivered like breath against the rock. A hand broke the surface. Pale, slender, dripping with black water. It hovered there, then disappeared, leaving nothing but a circle of distortion. I blinked, and the lake was still again. mirror perfect, unbroken. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, but the eyes lingered in memory, and my reflection, my real reflection, no longer looked quite right. I circled the edge, careful not to make waves. Every footstep felt louder than it should, as if the cavern itself was listening. A shiver rose from the water. The surface bulged, slow, deliberate, like a breath held too long under ice. I whispered into the dark, though I had no words. The lake replied in silence. A stillness so deep I could hear my own heartbeat, and beneath it something else, slower, heavier, patient. I knelt again, staring down. The reflection twisted once more. A figure formed beneath the glassy surface, pale and slick, staring straight up at me. I could see the hollows where my own eyes should have been. A mouth curved in a way my lips could never match, and then it was gone. I stepped back, trembling, feeling the air press against my skin, colder than before. The shadows seemed to pulse with the lake's heartbeat. I turned toward the ladder, but something made me pause. A splash, gentle, deliberate, like a tap on stone. No wind, no motion, only the black water, and eyes that lingered just beneath the surface. I climbed slowly, each rung a careful step away from the mirror below, and even as I left the cavern behind, the memory of those eyes followed me, pale and unblinking, beneath the quiet, still lake. The darkness above ground never felt the same. The night wind whispered differently now, and somewhere far below, the lake waited, waiting. The dust lay thick on the floor. Keys, old and rusted, scattered like fallen teeth. I knelt and let my fingers brush them. One caught my eye. A small bent thing, blackened by age. I lifted it. A laugh drifted through the shadows. Not close, not loud. Just a ripple, faint and thin, like wind in a cracked window. The corridor stretched before me. It had always been straight, familiar. Now it twisted, a slow, liquid bend, as though the walls were breathing. I set the key back, but the floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. Dust swirled in patterns I had never noticed. Another key, cool against my palm. I turned it over. Voices came then, soft at first, overlapping, memories I couldn't place. I shivered. The mind groaned. A corridor I remembered as empty now bristled with shadow. I walked toward it, drawn, hesitant. My foot caught on a piece of metal. A key, smaller this time, jagged. I picked it up. A face appeared, fleeting, pale, in the corner of my vision. I blinked. Gone. The air smelled of wet stone and something older, hidden beneath the earth. I tried to leave. The walls had moved again. I turned left. It was right, then left. I was lost, though I had walked here 100 times. Each key I touched whispered a memory. A child's laughter, tinny and high. A candle guttering. Footsteps behind me that weren't mine. I tried not to follow them. But the keys, they drew me in. One was heavy, pitted with rust. I held it to my chest and remembered something I never wanted to see. A man, smaller than I had imagined, standing in a sunless room. He pressed his hand against the stone, calling a name I forgot. The walls around him twisted. The mine itself seemed alive, breathing, listening. I stumbled back. The corridors were rearranging again. What had been behind me now loomed ahead. I could feel the mine's pulse beneath my shoes. Another key. This one warm, almost humming. I slid it along the lock of a door I had never seen. It opened, but nothing was there. Not empty, just quiet. A smell of rust, cold metal, old rain. The keys multiplied in my hand, each one heavier than the last. Every memory a weight pressing my chest down, my lungs tight. I heard laughter again. Children, older voices, echoes that didn't belong. I wanted to run, but my feet refused. A door I had never known swung open slowly. I could see faint light, pale and trembling. It didn't invite me, it warned. I put down a key. The laughter softened. But the shadows deepened. I picked up another. This one small, fragile, rusted almost to nothing. It unlocked something buried in my mind, a family at a table. Faces smiling, blurred. I wasn't sure if they were happy or if I only thought I remembered happiness. I dropped it. The key clattered. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the hollow mine. I walked forward, the floor uneven beneath me. Each corridor seemed endless. The mind rearranged itself, corridors stretching, folding, slipping into the dark. A faint breeze moved the dust across the floor. It felt like a sigh or a warning. I followed it, letting the keys fall to the ground behind me. I could hear footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling me. I didn't dare turn. The keys were silent now, resting in the dust, abandoned. The walls shimmered in the pale light. I passed a door that hadn't been there before. Through its frame, I glimpsed another corridor, endless, lined with the echoes of my own memories. I stepped inside. The laughter faded to a hum. I felt a hand brush the air behind me. Not mine, I pressed on. The keys lay forgotten, rusting scattered, and the mind breathed. I didn't look back. I don't know if it wanted me to, but the memory of the keys, the echo of the laughter, it stays, even as the dust settles again. The air smelled of damp stone and dust. My boots echoed softly against the narrow tunnel floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself was weighing me down. A sudden crack split the silence. I froze. The walls shivered. Then the ceiling gave way. Rocks rained behind me, sealing the tunnel. I was alone. Silence settled, thick and absolute. But beneath it, a faint pulsing thrum, like a heartbeat buried in the stone. It wasn't mine. I pressed my back to the cool wall. My fingers traced the jagged edges of rubble. Soft dust fell onto my palms, sifting like snow through my trembling hands. Shapes shifted just beyond the collapse. Eyes pale and patient watched from cracks and crevices. I blinked, and they didn't move, didn't breathe, only stared. The heartbeat pulsed again. Closer now. Each beat a slow knock against my chest, though I remained still. I could feel it in my teeth, in the hollow of my throat. I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I spoke aloud or only in thought. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the rocks, only the pause between my words. The tunnel stretched beyond the rubble, vanishing into black. I couldn't see the end, only the faint shimmer of moisture on the stone walls. A cold draft slid along my neck like a breath I couldn't place. Something moved. A shadow, or the memory of one? It drifted along the rubble, slipping between stones as if the darkness itself had taken shape. I swallowed. The echo of my heartbeat joined the rhythm under the rocks. Thump! Thump! Thump. I realized it was not mine at all. I crouched, trying to make myself smaller. The shapes waited, patient and silent. I imagined them counting the seconds I had left. Each pulse of the hidden heartbeat drew nearer, pressing through the stone into the marrow of my bones. Dust whispered under a loose rock. I reached toward it, compelled, though my mind screamed to pull back. Fingers brushed something cold, smooth. A hand, or stone shaped like one? I dared not pull. The heartbeat slowed, then quickened. A rhythm that did not match mine, yet echoed inside me. I could feel it vibrating in the soles of my feet. In my ribs, I forced my eyes on the rubble. Shapes crouched, half hidden, bending with the weight of shadows. I wanted to close my eyes to pretend they weren't there, but the tunnel pressed against my ears, the heartbeat loud enough to drown my thoughts. The dust settled again. I heard soft rustling like paper dragged over stone, and then silence, absolute silence. No heartbeat, no wind, no echo, only the faint scent of wet earth and the pressure of waiting shapes. I inched forward, each movement deliberate, careful. My fingertips scraped against the walls. Every grain of stone under my nails, every whisper of footing seemed to draw their attention. A shadow slipped closer. I couldn't tell where it began or ended. It was neither tall nor short. It was patient. The tunnel narrowed further. I pressed my shoulder against the stone, feeling its cold, unforgiving surface. Some instinct told me to stop moving, to become a part of the silence, to hope it would pass me by. The heartbeat returned, faint again, almost teasing. It pulsed from somewhere deep in the rubble, from a place that should not exist, where shadows leaned and waited, patient and still. I realized I could not escape. Not yet. The collapse behind me was complete. Ahead, only darkness folded inward like a mouth waiting to swallow. I sat down, my back against the cool stone. The rubble rose behind me, silent and final. Shapes watched. The heartbeat throbbed faintly. I closed my eyes, hoping that stillness would keep me safe. or at least make them forget I was here. I felt a breath along my cheek. Not mine, not warm, soft, deliberate, brushing the hair at my temple. I did not move. I could not. Time stretched, thick and sticky. I wondered if the world outside still knew I existed. But there was no answer. Only the heartbeat fading, only the weight of patient shapes, and the quiet, stretching tunnel that held me in its stone embrace. I breathed slowly, carefully, and listened to the silence wait for me to speak again. The fog rolled in before sunset, thick and unrelenting. It seeped between the trees like liquid silk, curling around roots and stones. I could barely see my own feet. Each step felt heavier than the last. The damp earth tugged at my shoes, at my ankles, as if it wanted me to stay. A shiver ran along my spine. Then I saw them. First, one pair of eyes, pale and unblinking, hovering in the gray. They weren't close, but they weren't far either. I froze. The mist seemed to press closer, muffling my breath, swallowing the sounds of the forest. Even the wind had fallen silent. The eyes blinked, slowly, in unison. It wasn't just one pair anymore. I counted 2, 3, maybe more. They hovered in the haze, glowing faintly like embers in a dying fire. Each blink made my chest tighten. I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice low, steady. "Hello?" I whispered, but the fog swallowed it immediately. No echo, no answer. A rustling. Behind a tree, then to my left, then all around. I couldn't tell where it came from, or if it even came from anything alive. The eyes followed. Every movement I made was mirrored, every turn of my head reflected in those pale lights. I felt them studying me, waiting. My ankles felt cold. The fog curling there now was thicker, almost tangible. It tugged at me with soft insistence, like fingers dragging across skin. I wanted to run, but the ground seemed unfamiliar. Every step forward sank into mist, and the path behind me dissolved. I was untethered, alone in a gray sea. Then they blinked again, simultaneously, perfectly synchronized. It made my stomach lurch, a rhythm I couldn't escape. I stumbled. The fog clung to my clothes, my hair whispering in a way I couldn't understand. It felt alive, patient, waiting for something I didn't know. A shape moved. Tall, slender, barely visible, folding into the mist like smoke. It lingered at the edge of my vision, and when I turned, it was gone. Only the eyes remained. They were everywhere now, scattered through the haze. Some high in the trees, some low among the roots. My legs ached from the uneven ground. I wanted to sit, to rest, to blink, and hope they'd vanish. But the fog wrapped tighter, almost gentle, almost seductive. I whispered my own name. It returned to me hollow, distant, not my voice at all. Something else was speaking beneath it. I took another step, and the ground shifted beneath my feet. The mist rose in thick coils, wrapping around my calves. It tugged at me again, slow, deliberate. The eyes blinked once more, then twice. Then they vanished. Silence swallowed everything. The forest seemed empty, but I knew better. I could feel the gaze lingering, hidden just beyond the veil of gray. I crouched, pressing my hands into the damp soil. The fog slithered over my fingers, cold and soft, retreating only to curl around me again. It smelled faintly of earth, of decay, and of something older I couldn't name. A single blink of light appeared in the distance. Faint, wavering, just at the edge of sight. I froze, unwilling to move, yet unable to look away. The fog whispered against my skin. Soft footsteps, almost rhythmic, brushed past me. I didn't turn. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then everything stilled. No footsteps, no blink, no tugging. Only the fog, curling, curling, curling. Around my ankles, around my arms, around my chest. I sat there half hidden in gray, and I waited. Not for them, but for whatever came next, hidden in silence. The mist shifted again, faintly, gently, as if sighing. I could feel eyes everywhere and nowhere, watching, waiting, just beyond my vision, and I realized I wasn't sure I wanted them to leave. The forest held its breath. I did too, and in that fog, I felt entirely, disturbingly alone. The mine was colder than I remembered. Damp, heavy air pressed against my chest. The lantern flickered, throwing pale light across the jagged walls. I hadn't been here in years. Or maybe I had. Time felt slippery like fog that curls around your ankles. The tunnels stretched endlessly, but then I saw it. A door. Alone. Not leaning against any wall. Not attached to anything. It was wooden. Old but smooth. A faint hum radiated from it, like the quiet vibration of a sleeping animal. I stepped closer. My boots barely made a sound on the wet stone. The hum grew warmer, almost like a whisper meant only for me. I reached out. The wood was cool under my fingers. There was a pulse to it. Slow, deliberate, almost alive. The air shifted. A smell of damp earth mixed with something metallic. I swallowed. My throat felt thick. I opened it. Light spilled out. Not ordinary light. Soft, wavering, like memories caught between breaths. Inside. I could see them. Figures moving through dark tunnels, carrying picks and lamps that never went out. Miners trapped, repeating the same gestures, the same conversations over and over. I blinked. A miner stopped mid-step, turned slowly toward me. Eyes hollow but aware. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The hum drew me in deeper. His lips moved. No words reached me, only the echo of intention. He stepped closer. The walls around the door seemed to dissolve. Stone became mist. Mist became shadow. I could hear the faint scrape of tools, the shuffle of boots on wet stone, breath, always breath. The miner reached the threshold and paused. I felt a chill run up my spine, a soft tremor in the air. The light shifted. Suddenly, I was no longer certain of my own hands, my own feet. Everything felt unanchored. He stepped closer. I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to run. But the hum became a rhythm, steady, almost comforting in its insistence. Through the door, I saw more. Faces pressed against invisible walls. Hands that reached but could never hold. A laughter that was not laughter, but a soft, endless echo. I felt my own memory bend. The edges of myself became frayed. Who had I been before I saw the door? Did I even belong here? The miner raised a hand. It was slow, deliberate, a silent invitation. I took a step back. The floor beneath me felt uncertain, like walking on water that remembered every misstep I had ever made. He smiled, or perhaps I imagined it. The hum shifted to a low vibration. It wrapped around my chest, around my mind. A tunnel behind him disappeared into nothing. Another appeared. Endless loops. I could see their lives repeated over centuries, like fragile glass or fragile time. I leaned closer to the door. The hum seemed to whisper my name. My own voice felt foreign. A sudden rustle made me flinch. But it wasn't wind. It was intention. Something waiting just beyond perception. The miner stepped forward again. Closer, closer. And I realized the loop was watching me. The loop knew I was here. I wanted to close the door, but my hands did not obey. The light inside beckoned, and fear mingled with awe. I could see myself in there, somewhere, or a version of me, trapped in the hum, in the soft scrape of eternity. The miner tilted his head, studying me. He raised his hand once more, and this time I felt the pull, soft, gentle, impossible to resist. I leaned in, and the mind's chill became a warmth. The shadow became a soft pulse, and I understood that some doors are not meant to be closed. I felt the hum in my bones. I felt it around my name, and then I was just another echo, another memory folding back into itself. The door remained, alone, humming, and I could hear it still. The tunnel was narrower than I remembered. Stone walls, slick with damp, closed in on either side. A faint hum threaded through the darkness, almost imperceptible, like the breath of the earth itself. I pulled my coat tighter. The wind, it wasn't outside. It moved around me, curling in the corners, stirring the dust at my feet. From somewhere ahead, a whisper drifted. Not words I could understand, just the cadence of speech, soft, urgent, and impossibly far away. It carried through the tunnels, bouncing off the walls, folding into itself. Shadows stretched along the jagged stones. The walls seemed to breathe, swelling and shrinking in rhythm with the unseen wind. I thought I saw one reach toward me, a thin, curling finger of black. The air was colder now. It tasted faintly of rust and old water. My footsteps echoed, though they didn't sound like mine. They were lighter, slipping across the stone behind me. I stopped. listened. Nothing. Then it shifted. The darkness shifted. I was sure of it. Something moved just beyond my vision. I took another step, and the whispers multiplied. They came from every direction at once, pressing against my ears, brushing across my skin. I wanted to run, but the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. A faint light appeared ahead, pale like a lantern half drowned in fog. It made the walls shimmer and bend, as if the stones themselves were leaning toward it. I moved closer. The whispers followed, no longer distant. They circled me, rising and falling like wind in hollow trees. I felt them in my chest, vibrating through the bones. Then nothing. The light vanished. The shadows snapped back to stillness, flat and hungry. The wind died down, leaving a silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat like a drum in a coffin. I crouched. I pressed my hands to the wall. The stone was warmer than it should have been, pulsing faintly under my fingers as if alive. A single draft stirred. It traced along my neck, brushing my hair, carrying the faint scent of something metallic and wet. And with it, a sound, a soft, dragging shuffle from just behind me. I didn't dare turn. My breath came shallow. The tunnel seemed to twist, a subtle warp, making it impossible to tell how far behind the movement lingered. The whispers returned, softer now, closer. One word I could almost understand. Almost. It trailed off before my mind could catch it. Shadows shifted again, longer this time, leaning toward me like they wanted to speak. A wall that had been solid seconds before rippled, as if someone or something was pressing just beneath the surface. I pressed my hand against it. The stone trembled, almost humming with life. I tried to move forward. The tunnel stretched farther than I remembered, bending unnaturally. Every step echoed louder than the last, carrying with it the faint whisper of movement behind me. The wind returned suddenly. It howled around the corners, tugging at my clothes and hair. And in it the sound of a sigh, long, wet, almost relieved. A shadow passed overhead. Not across the floor, not along the walls, but above me, sliding along the ceiling like smoke. I could feel it watching, waiting. I slowed. Every instinct screamed to stop, to sink into the stone, to disappear into the tunnel itself. But something in me, curiosity, foolishness, or fear, pushed me forward. A chamber opened. The walls widened, revealing an empty space slick with moisture. The light here was dim, unnatural, and the shadows pooled into shapes I could not name. The wind settled here. It swirled lazily, carrying the faint taste of decay and iron. The whispers were gone, or maybe I had simply stopped hearing them. I stepped closer to the center. The floor was cold, but uneven, as if something had been carved or dug and then left to rot. I saw marks, shallow and deliberate, leading deeper into the darkness beyond. A pause. Silence stretched like a held breath. Then, from somewhere beneath me, a faint shuffle, soft as falling sand. I froze. The shadows trembled. The wind breathed across my neck, and I realized I was not alone. Not here. Not anywhere in this endless maze of stone and shadow. I could feel it, following, patient, always just beyond the edges of perception. And even as I tried to convince myself it was nothing, I knew the wind would carry it forever through every chamber I had yet to see. I moved forward again, careful, quiet. The whispers returned, faintly now, like promises or warnings. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the reach of my pale light, the shadow waited. The tunnel was quiet. Thick fog clung to the low ceiling, curling around the stone like smoke. My lantern cast a pale circle ahead, flickering. I paused. Above me, tiny lights appeared. Lanterns hanging from nothing. They swayed slowly. No wind. Just the faint hum of something unseen. Each glow painted the walls in soft amber. And in the light I saw them. Figures frozen mid-step, pickaxes raised, faces caught in silent screams. Blinking made them vanish. Shadows melted back into the rough stone. Only pale handprints remained, pressed across the walls like fingerprints left by someone unseen. I swallowed. The air smelled damp, metallic. My boots echoed softly, but even they sounded loud in the hush. A lantern swung closer. I didn't breathe. Its light revealed a man frozen in a shove, eyes wide with fear, mouth open as if to shout, Then it swung away. He was gone. Handprints replaced him. I took a careful step forward. The walls seemed narrower here, the ceiling lower. Each lantern above me pulsed as if watching. I could feel them, though I couldn't see. Soft movements just beyond my gaze. The faint rustle of clothes. Or stone shifting. One lantern hovered at eye level. I stared into it. Inside, another miner, mid-fall into the darkness, frozen. The details were too sharp, too real. Blinking again erased him. Only the ghostly prints remained, stretching upward, fading into the shadows. I wondered how long they had been here. How long I had been wandering. Time felt slippery, unmeasured. The lanterns swayed in a slow, patient rhythm. Each revealed a fragment of life paused. The swing of an arm, the curve of a back, the tilt of a head, and sometimes just a hand reaching. Not toward me, not away, but somewhere in between. I stepped further. My lantern barely lit the ground at my feet. A faint glow bounced off the walls, revealing more handprints, larger, layered over each other. The images in the light started to blur. The miners' faces melted into one another. Fingers stretched impossibly long across the stone. Eyes blinked, too slowly, then stared right through me. I heard a soft dragging behind me. Not my boots. Something lighter. Something. Following, I didn't dare turn. A lantern swung close, nearly brushing my shoulder. I felt the heat, or maybe it was my own breath trapped in panic. It moved above me. A pale figure, mid-step, pickaxe held high, hair frozen in motion. I blinked. Only handprints, soft footsteps echoed far ahead. Slow, deliberate, looping back. I stopped. The silence returned. My lantern dimmed. I tilted it. The figures appeared in the light again. Not the same as before, different. Some reaching toward the ceiling, some crouching like hiding from something deeper in the rock. The handprints seemed to shift, too. Fingers curling, stretching, touching the faint glow. I wanted to touch them to confirm something. I didn't. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened. The lanterns multiplied, swaying closer together, tighter, crowding the tunnel, yet each revealed only fragments. Glimpses of motion frozen. A lantern dipped suddenly. Its light caught a wall full of handprints, but one moved. A slow, deliberate press as if reaching out. I froze. Behind me, a faint hum began. A vibration underfoot, soft but insistent. I could feel it in my chest. It rose and fell with the sway of the lanterns. I moved. One careful step. The hum deepened. The light swirled gently. The figures, shifting, merging, fading. A sudden silence followed. The hum vanished. Lanterns hung motionless, perfectly still. I blinked, and then a single handprint, pale and fresh, appeared where the air should have been. No motion, no light, no sound. I didn't look back. I didn't move forward. I only stood, watching. The tunnel waited. The lanterns hung, suspended in time. And the handprints? They whispered just beyond my hearing. I felt their eyes, even in the darkness, even in the silence. And then I was alone again. The hallway was dim, the pale light from the street lamp slicing through the narrow window. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and dust. I had thought it empty, silent. My own footsteps sounded hollow on the floorboards. And then another set joined. Soft, deliberate, mirroring mine perfectly. I froze. The echo matched every shift, every weight of my heel. It was impossibly precise. The walls seemed closer. Shadows gathered where the corners should have been. I tilted my head, trying to hear, trying to tell myself it was nothing. But the steps didn't stop. They fell just behind me, just ahead, always somewhere I couldn't see. Each one carried a weight I didn't recognize. I remembered a stairwell from years ago, cold cement under bare feet. A laugh that wasn't mine, but sounded like it once had been. The echo's rhythm slowed, then quickened. I stepped forward cautiously, feeling the vibration through the soles of my shoes. It was impossible, yet it was real. A door creaked somewhere far away. Or was it closer? The floorboards hummed beneath me with the same pattern, the same intent. I stopped, hoping the sound would vanish. But it didn't. The steps circled me now. Or maybe I was moving in a circle. The hallway had changed shape. The corners weren't where they used to be. A draft brushed my neck. Soft, almost apologetic. And the footsteps. They paused, I could feel them rather than hear. A presence layered over the floorboards. Memory and fear tangled, twisting together into a quiet dread. I swallowed. My breath came in shallow bursts. The echo resumed. 1, 2, 3, perfectly timed. I imagined faces in the shadows. Familiar yet wrong. Children I didn't recognize. Friends I had forgotten. The pattern shifted. A soft scuff, a longer pause, a dragging that scraped against the grain of the wood. Every step now carried a story I couldn't place. I tried to speak. The words stalled in my throat. The echo answered with its own rhythm, almost conversational, almost knowing. I moved again. The steps followed. I stopped. They kept going. A chair rattled in the corner. Not violently, just a whisper of motion. The air thickened, heavier with each silent footfall that wasn't mine. I remembered a basement. The smell of mildew and cold stone. And someone, or something, watching. The hallway stretched unnaturally. I could see the far door, but it seemed miles away. Every step I took, the echo was already there, waiting, patient. I touched the wall for guidance. Rough paint under my fingertips. And still, it moved around me, through me, a phantom companion I hadn't invited. The footsteps paused again, or perhaps they never truly paused. The silence was just another kind of sound, humming in the floorboards, in the walls, in the space behind my ribs. I listened to it, tried to map it, name it, pin it down. But memory kept seeping through, fearful, fragmented. I turned a corner. The echo shifted faster, shorter, erratic, a stutter in time. And then it slowed again, patient, waiting, observing. A light flickered overhead. Not the lamp, not anything I had turned on. It was just there, pale, shaking, illuminating a space that felt both familiar and impossibly wrong. The echo was close now, no longer behind or ahead. It was inside the same space, layered over me, inside me. I tried to walk, tried to breathe, tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But reality had softened around the edges. And the echo, it had not. I stopped. The footsteps continued. Soft, deliberate, patient. I imagined them carrying every fear I had ever buried, every regret, every glance that had caught me off guard, every shadow I had ignored. Each step pressed into my memory like wet clay. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I listened, and then nothing changed. The echo remained, a quiet, constant presence. I closed my eyes, hoping it would dissolve. It didn't. It simply lingered. The hallway stretched. The light flickered. The footsteps whispered without sound. And I understood that some presences do not leave, even when you do. I leaned against the wall, cold, solid, comforting almost. And the echo matched my breath, slow, deliberate, patient. Always just behind me, the tunnel was damp. Cold stone pressed against my back as I moved forward. The air tasted faintly of iron and wet earth. Somewhere deep, a note lingered, soft, almost shy. A voice, fragile and melodic, threading through the dark. At first I thought it was my mind, a trick of the tunnels where echoes fold over themselves. But it sang again. Each step made the walls hum beneath my fingers. The song was delicate, sorrowful, like a memory I couldn't claim. It pulled me, gently, insistently. I paused. The shadows trembled. A cold breath of air slid across my neck. The melody bent, twisting around corners I hadn't yet seen. It shimmered like glass cracking softly. I followed, slow, careful. My shoes whispered against the stone. Every echo seemed alive. A faint light pooled ahead. Not warm, not comforting. Just pale, hovering like it didn't belong. The voice rose, bending with the walls. A note stretched too long, sorrow sharpening into something uneasy. I shivered, even though my pace did not falter. Rust dripped from the ceiling. Somewhere, water ran like a silent river, and beneath it, the song lingered, sadder than before. I couldn't name the sorrow. It wasn't mine, and yet it brushed against my chest like a hand I couldn't shake. The tunnel narrowed. Stone walls pressed closer. The singing twisted into half words, murmurs I almost recognized. It felt like pleading, like a story someone had forgotten to finish. I wanted to look away, but the melody led me. Around a bend, the walls slick and cold. A shadow pooled there, but not moving. The song split into whispers, a harmony of pain and longing. I could almost see the shapes it made, hovering just beyond sight. I stopped. The tunnel fell silent for a heartbeat. Then the singing returned, slightly distorted, like someone had dragged their fingers across a glass harp. I pressed my hand against the wall. The stone pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The notes wrapped around it, trembling. It spoke to me without words. A sadness that was neither mine nor anyone else's. Just sorrow suspended in air. I moved forward again, each step magnifying the strange melody. It hummed, quivering, like water trapped beneath ice. The walls began to shift, or maybe my eyes were tricking me. Faint shapes swirled in the pale light, bending toward the sound. Something waited, patient. The song became uneven, broken in places, echoing cracks that stabbed the quiet. I imagined hands reaching from the walls, cold and hollow. I told myself they were shadows, but the voice followed me, singing a language I almost understood. Almost. The air thickened, tasting faintly of ash and memory. My lungs ached, but I couldn't stop. The melody tugged at my bones. I saw it then. A figure, pale, crouched at the far end of the corridor, not moving, but singing. Its song bent reality around it. The walls curved toward it. The floor seemed to pulse beneath my feet. I swallowed hard. The melody broke into shards of sound, some notes sharp as broken glass, some soft as breath on my neck. It tilted its head, and the song became a sigh, long, trembling, unending. I felt it seep into me. I wanted to leave, but every instinct, every pulse in my chest urged me closer. Curiosity braided with dread, the figure didn't speak, didn't move, just sang, sorrow weaving itself into the stone. I stepped forward. The light shifted. Colors I could not name trembled at the edges of vision. The melody twisted again, distorted now like a reflection in cracked water. And then, suddenly, it paused. Silence. The air was thick and waiting. The walls hummed faintly, as if holding their breath. I realized I didn't know if the song had ended, or if I had just stopped hearing it. I took a step back. The figure did not follow. Yet its presence lingered, stretching across the stone and shadow. I stayed there for a long moment, listening to the tunnel settle, water dripping, my own breath loud. The faint impression of singing remained, buried beneath the silence. I moved on slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness. The tunnel curved, swallowed me in darkness, and somewhere, far ahead, a soft note lingered, a faint promise or a warning I couldn't name. The room was quiet. A pale light leaked through the half-closed blinds. Dust floated in the air, catching what little I could see. I felt it before I saw it. A weight in the corner of the room. A presence that made my chest tighten, slow, deliberate. I told myself it was imagination. Shadows do strange things at night, but this was different. It crouched there, low and still. I could barely make out its outline. Thin, hunched, as if the darkness itself had bent into shape. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed to look away, but my eyes refused to obey. It didn't move at first, just watched, a stillness that made the room feel too small. A faint rustling came from the floorboards beneath it, slow, uneven, not quite the rhythm of my own steps. I blinked, and it wasn't there, only a shiver of cold air where it had been. I told myself I had imagined it, that the corner was empty, but the lingering chill didn't lie. The walls seemed to lean closer. A soft hum filled the space, barely audible. I could feel it in my teeth, a vibration of something unseen. I moved cautiously toward the opposite side of the room. My feet made no sound, or perhaps the room had swallowed them like it had swallowed the figure. The light shifted. A shadow stretched across the floor. It wasn't mine. I froze. Then a whisper of movement tickled the edge of my hearing. Soft footsteps or fingernails dragging along the wood. I turned my head. The corner was empty. Still, too empty. My skin prickled. Every hair stood on end. A cold draft spiraled from the dark corner, curling around my ankles. I took a step closer. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, and the shadow in the corner stretched higher. It crouched again, closer to the wall this time. Its shape pressed against the floorboards, unnatural. I blinked. Gone. But the emptiness felt heavier, like the darkness itself had settled into my chest. I could hear it breathing. Not me, not air! Something else. The hum grew louder, a resonance that pressed into my skull. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't stop. The corner pulsed with it, as if alive. Alive and patient. I tried to step back. My legs wouldn't obey. It was waiting. Always waiting. I reached for the light switch. The pale glow flickered. The room quivered like it had a heartbeat of its own. And then I saw it again, crouched low, watching, just a silhouette against the wall. I couldn't look away. My mind screamed, but my body was frozen. Even my eyes felt trapped, staring. I thought I noticed movement in its head, a tilt, almost imperceptible. A gaze that didn't blink, didn't breathe, yet somehow existed. I shut my eyes, counted to 10 slowly, hoping when I opened them, it would be gone. It wasn't. Only darker now, blending more seamlessly into the corner. The air turned icy. Every exhale came out in white mist. I felt my own warmth draining, leaving only the hum and the shadow. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "Go away!" The words were swallowed, a single breath. Then silence. I dared to blink. The corner was empty. The shadow vanished, but the weight remained. A cold imprint on the floor, a residue in the air. I stepped backward, trembling. Every step felt like trespassing in a place I shouldn't exist. I wanted to leave. Every part of me screamed to run, but the hallway beyond the door stretched endlessly, as if the house itself had changed. The corner remained in my mind. I could feel it watching, even from a distance. A quiet, patient hunger. I returned to my room later. The lights on this time, the world filled with ordinary sounds. The hum replaced by the whir of the heater. I laughed softly. A nervous, empty sound. It didn't feel like relief. And then, in the corner of my eye, a flicker. A shadow that should not have moved. I didn't look again. I never did. The room was quiet. Almost comforting. But I still felt it there, crouched, waiting. Cold air brushing against my neck. A soft pulse against the floorboards. And a whisper, just at the edge of hearing, that I wasn't alone. The corner holds its secrets. Always. And sometimes, when the light is just right, it remembers me. The air was thick, heavy with dust, the kind that clung to your throat and made every breath feel borrowed. I hadn't meant to come here, not tonight. The room was long, endless in its gloom. Pale moonlight seeped through a cracked window, painting the walls in a sickly gray. Chains hung from the ceiling, rusted and rigid, though they moved slightly, almost as if breathing. I stopped. The sway wasn't from the draft. I could feel it before I saw it. A clang echoed, not loud, not sudden, just impossibly far. It rolled through the hall and settled into the bones of the building. I swallowed. My pulse picked up, though I tried to breathe calm. A shadow passed among the chains, slow, deliberate, like it was counting each step. It whispered a name. Soft, dragging. My name? No, not mine. Someone else's. But it lingered in the hollow of my ears. I took a step closer. The chains shivered in response. A metallic hum, like a warning, thrummed in the silence. I wanted to retreat, but my feet felt heavier than air. Another whisper. It called to the lost, the ones who never left. Each syllable trembled, touched by sorrow. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it followed anyway. The shadow shifted again, a flicker at the edge of my vision. I thought I saw a face, or maybe it was the lack of one. Eyes empty, staring from a place I couldn't name, I wanted to turn away. The chains began to clang gently, as if testing the weight of the silence. Echoes stretched, grew, disappeared. I felt small, fragile. Something cold brushed my neck. Not wind, not a person. A chill that knew me, that remembered. I shivered, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A single chain swung faster. It hit another with a hollow knock. Then another. The room filled with a rhythm, slow, dragging, sad. Each note a story of absence. I saw the shadow clearly now, moving among the chains, hands reaching, touching, never grasping. And it whispered more names. Some I recognized, some I didn't. The names wrapped around my mind, soft, curling, impossible to release. A child, a friend, someone long gone. Each clang of the chains punctuated their presence. They were here, all of them. The floorboards groaned under my weight. I froze. The shadow paused. It tilted as if listening. The whispers softened to a hum. I thought about leaving, but the door was gone. Or maybe it had never been. The chains hung too low now, brushing my hair, my arms. Their touch was cold, patient. Another name whispered. Closer. I couldn't tell if it came from the chains, the shadow, or the corners of my own mind. It lingered, tasting the fear in me, feeding. A gust of wind, or the memory of one, swept through. The chains swung violently, clanging together. Then silence. The shadow melted into the darkness. And yet, I knew it was still there. I walked forward. Each step echoed in a hollow eternity. The rusted chains trembled in response. One hit my shoulder. Cold, sharp, alive. I swallowed hard. The whispers began again. Names endless, drawn out. Some were joyful. Some broken. All sad. All tethered to this place and maybe... To me, I rested my palm on a chain. Its surface rough, pitted. It vibrated faintly, like a heartbeat. I felt it through my fingertips, a resonance I couldn't explain. The shadow returned, but only partially. A shoulder, a flicker of movement. I sensed longing in it. Not anger, not malice, just loss. I stepped back. The chains quieted slightly, almost in mourning. The moonlight shifted. The room seemed smaller now, more intimate. I could feel the weight of all the names, all the memories pressing softly around me, a final clang. Single, deliberate. Echoed and vanished, I breathed. Silence stretched like fog. I didn't move for a long while. I wasn't sure if I was still alone or if I had ever been. A soft whisper lingered as I left. It didn't call a name this time. It didn't need to. I could carry it with me. The chain swayed in the darkness, and I walked away, the sound following me. Or perhaps I followed it. The lantern trembled in my hand. Its light shivered over the rough walls of the cabin. Outside, the night was thick, black, breathing. A soft wind rattled the window pane. I thought it was the branches scraping, but then I heard it again. Closer, deliberate. Shadows pooled in the corners. They seemed to stretch when I blinked, curling toward the edges of the flickering glow. I tried to steady the lantern. The flame danced like a living thing, wobbling, shrinking, refusing to hold its shape. The wooden floor groaned under my weight. I froze. Another groan, softer this time, echoed back. A faint laughter threaded through the dark. Not cruel, not sharp, but hollow almost. Inviting, I swallowed. The lantern guttered. One long shiver of flame lingered, then died. Darkness pressed in from all sides. I could no longer see the corners, could no longer tell the floor from the walls. The air smelled damp, earthy, like the cellar I'd never entered or the hollow spaces beneath old houses. I held my breath. A whisper of movement, soft footsteps dragging lightly over the wood. I wanted to call out. My voice would have been swallowed whole, so I didn't. Something brushed past my arm. A weight, slight but unmistakable. I could feel it settle just beyond my shoulder. The laughter came again. It swirled around me, a slow, curling echo that lingered and faded. I tried to take a step forward. The floor seemed to shift underfoot. A shadow stretched, taller than it should, and then recoiled. Cold seeped into my bones. The darkness smelled of smoke and rust. I pressed my hands to my ears, hoping to block it out. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, then cracked with the faintest hum. Like wind through an old grate, I tilted my head, straining to understand the shapes moving just beyond vision. They were pale, long, twisting in impossible ways. A soft breath brushed my cheek. I spun, but found only black. The cabin itself seemed to lean closer, listening. I felt a hand, impossibly cold, slide across my shoulder. Not grasping, just there. The lantern remained dark. The air tightened, and the hollow laughter whispered once more. I pressed myself against the wall. The shadows grew, then shrank. I realized they weren't following me. They were waiting. A door creaked somewhere, though I hadn't moved. The sound seemed to roll over me, curling into the darkness behind my eyes. I whispered to myself, though my own voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. Time had stopped. The cabin's breath matched mine. Slow, deliberate, patient. Something leaned closer, its presence heavy, its curiosity unhurried. I could see faint outlines now. Shapes, thin, tall, unmoving, only suggested by the faint reflection of moonlight on dust. The air vibrated slightly. A pulse or a heart, I couldn't tell which. I wanted to run, but where? The darkness held the edges of the room like a net. Another flicker, tiny, desperate, of what might have been the lantern. Then gone. The soft laughter wound around me. Welcoming, coaxing. Stay, it seemed to say. I pressed my back to the wall, eyes wide, seeing everything and nothing. The silence around me wasn't empty. It was alive. A shadow fell across my feet. It lingered, then retreated a fraction, just enough to remind me it was still there. I imagined holding the lantern. Flame, bright and stubborn, but it was gone. I listened to the dark, and it spoke in whispers only my mind could hear. The shapes bent, curved, leaning toward me, but never touching. I felt their patience, their quiet hunger. The way they knew I was too small, too fragile, too human. The cabin held its breath. I held mine, and the darkness shifted again. A faint, pale glow appeared far in the corner. It wasn't the lantern. It was softer, gentler, a suggestion of light rather than an insistence, and the laughter lingered, soft, welcoming, patient. I couldn't see it clearly, but I knew it was waiting. For me, I sat on the floor. The shadows leaned back slightly. The air relaxed. The lantern was gone, but I felt its warmth remembered, fading slowly, like a dream slipping away, and somewhere, just beyond the edges of sight, the soft laughter continued, wrapping around me like a question I could never answer. The fog had thickened as I walked along the old railway embankment. The air was damp, tasting faintly of wet stone and rust. Even the trees seemed hesitant, their bare limbs shivering in the pale light. I noticed it first as a shadow between two moss-covered walls. A tunnel, narrow, dark, as if it had always been waiting for me. It didn't belong here, or maybe I didn't belong there. The earth beneath my boots hummed softly, almost like a warning. I stepped closer, drawn despite the chill creeping along my spine. The entrance pulsed slightly, subtle, like the beat of a distant heart. I took another step, and then it vanished. 1 second there, a hollow, gaping maw of darkness. The next, nothing but cracked stone and damp leaves. I froze. The fog swirled around me, thicker, whispering my name without words. I leaned closer to where it had been. The walls seemed wrong. They weren't still. Subtle ripples passed across the brick like slow breathing. A faint glow appeared along the floor, soft and golden, crawling toward me. I thought it might be a trick of the fog, or maybe I wanted it to be. The ground shifted beneath my feet. A draft rose from nowhere, carrying a hint of soil and something older, deeper. I shivered, but I moved forward anyway. Something guided me, though I wasn't sure if it was outside or inside my own mind. A soft pressure at the back of my skull, gentle yet insistent. Every step felt like being pulled by a hand I couldn't see. The walls breathed more deliberately now, rising and falling like lungs. Sometimes I could hear them whispering. Not words, just intent, urgency maybe, or patience. I tried to step back, but the fog had changed. It clung to me, wet and slow, masking the world I knew. I could no longer tell if I was moving forward or circling, lost in a pulse of mist. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. It mirrored me in shape, but not in light. It didn't walk. It drifted, and when I blinked, it was gone. I leaned against the wall, fingertips grazing the damp brick. It throbbed. Or maybe that was me. Maybe my heartbeat had taken the shape of the tunnel. I whispered to myself, though I barely recognized the sound. Nothing came back except echoes that were too fast, too precise. The air felt liquid around my ears, forming paths I could almost step onto. Then the glow returned, stronger, hugging the contours of the walls. I followed it instinctively. I wasn't walking. I was being carried, step after careful, hesitant step. A rustling rose somewhere behind me, soft, patient, unhurried. I dared not turn. The fog blurred everything, but the feeling of eyes, many eyes, remained. Watching. Waiting. I thought I saw the end of the tunnel ahead. A small patch of sky, pale and uncertain, pressed against the darkness. Hope stirred in my chest. But when I stepped closer, the floor gave way into nothing, no walls, no glow. Just the void swallowing the path I thought I knew. I felt myself hesitate, teetering on certainty and madness. The tunnel shifted again. Walls curling inward, stretching outward, breathing, waiting. I understood suddenly that it had never been static. It responded to me. To my fear, my awe, my insistence. I tried to speak, to ask it what it wanted. Only silence replied, and yet the silence carried weight, guiding me. I followed because stopping felt impossible. Footsteps fell behind me, soft, like leaves settling on soil. I didn't turn. I didn't want to know who or what was walking my shadow. Finally, I stepped into a patch of fog so thick I could barely see my own hands. The tunnel dissolved completely. The world snapped back, but not fully. The sky was wrong. The air tasted older. I wasn't sure if I had moved or if it had moved me. I walked on, always on, hearing the walls breathe just beyond my senses, feeling the pulse of something ancient guiding me forward. Sometimes, when the fog curls at the edge of the embankment, I think I can see it again. A tunnel that wasn't but still waits, and I wonder, does it exist only when I look for it? Or do I exist only because it allows me to see? The tunnel ended. A pale light flickered just ahead. I didn't expect it. Not really. It hovered like a whisper, thin and trembling. I stepped closer. The walls were slick with damp and the air smelled of iron. Each breath felt heavy, thick as the fog I imagined waiting outside. The glow grew faintly brighter, warming the edges of the dark. I realized it was an exit. Not a door. Just a fracture in the rock spilling out into the night. The forest. The fog lay thick over it. A soft white blanket. Restless. I could almost hear it moving. Branches pressed against one another. Leaves rustled, though no wind touched them. I stepped forward, hesitant. The ground shifted beneath my boots, brittle stone giving way to soft soil, and then I felt it. The mine behind me. It wasn't alive. Not exactly, but it waited. Its dark mouth stretched endlessly. Silent, patient. My heartbeat filled the tunnel, a slow, steady drum against the hush of the world outside. I didn't look back. The shadows in the fog stretched, unnaturally long, crawling toward me with every hesitant step. The air tasted of wet earth and something older. A faint hum rose beneath the forest floor, or maybe it was my own ears, ringing from the dark. I walked. Every step seemed to echo, then vanish. The exit narrowed. The glow fell on pale stones, moss slick and quiet. I paused. A soft breeze drifted through the trees. It stirred the fog in gentle waves. Shapes formed and broke apart. Like the forest itself was breathing. I wanted to run, but my legs obeyed. There was something fragile about the air. Fragile, yet full of expectation. The tunnel behind me exhaled a cool sigh. Or perhaps it was just the fog, pressing through the fracture, touching my skin. The shadows twitched. They moved in ways that made no sense, bending around tree trunks, disappearing into nothing. I thought of turning back. A small voice inside whispered, I shouldn't. I let the forest pull me in. Leaves brushed my arms. Damp and cold. The fog closed around me like silk. I felt the earth beneath my boots soften. Almost welcoming, something shifted behind a cluster of birch. I froze. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. A shape. Pale, drifting, and then it dissolved into the mist. I walked again. The exit opened wider, revealing a clearing. A single crooked tree leaned toward me, its branches like thin fingers. I could hear my breath in the silence. The mine still waited behind me, patient, watching. I wondered if it had always been there, or if I had only just noticed. The fog thickened, swallowing the forest edges. I reached the clearing's center. The glow faded behind me. The mind's mouth was now just a memory, or a warning I couldn't quite recall. Shadows lingered, stretching thin across the ground, reaching without intent. I felt an odd relief, a quiet acceptance, though tinged with unease. Something had followed me. I didn't dare look. The forest whispered. Each step forward carried the weight of silence, heavy and soft all at once. I could feel the hum of life, or something like life, threading through the fog. A rustle, a sigh, the brush of unseen wings. I moved slowly, deliberately, through the mist. The night stretched wide, endless and pale. I wondered if I had left the mind behind, or if it had left me. The fog curled around my ankles. I heard faint footsteps behind me. But when I paused, they stopped too. I let the silence settle over me. The glow from the tunnel disappeared entirely. Yet I didn't feel alone. The forest seemed to lean closer, patient, almost. Expectant. My heartbeat slowed. The chill seeped through my clothes, through my skin. And still the shadows moved. Long and slow, I took another step. The fog parted just enough to show the trees beyond. I could see nothing further. Yet I felt the world expand around me. I breathed in the damp, the quiet, the weight of being watched. And then I stopped. Nothing called my name, nothing beckoned. Only the lingering hum of the mine, somewhere behind, and the soft, endless whisper of the fog. I moved forward again, step by step, into the pale, waiting night.